behalf of Green Party and I also support the motion regardless of whether it is amended. Climate change is happening and our communities are experiencing the consequences of it. Freak weather events have become commonplace. In response to floods in June 2007, a local MLA stated, "In the past 8 years, it is about the 8th time I have heard from various ministers that those are 1 in every 100-year events. It seems that we've had 1,000 years of disaster all wrapped up in the past 8 years." Those weren't from Sandal wearing green, those were the words of Sammy Wilson. And he highlighted a problem that we do face, whatever your view on climate change is we're facing increased extreme weather and we need to take action. I have to.
I'll thank the member for giving way. And would he accept that the reason which I gave at that stage was not because we were experiencing global warming, but because we were building, for example, on places where previously didn't build, that we had got far more urbanisation, so we had hard runoff surfaces which channeled water into one point very quickly. So much of what he is describing is due to the physical characteristics that change as a result of development, rather than something to do with man-made global warming.
I thank the member for his intervention. I'm glad that he supports sustainable land planning, and I welcome progressive responses to future planning debates. We've seen since 2000, the turn of the century, the UK has experienced the 5 wettest years in recorded history and the 7 warmest years in recorded history. Whilst weather and climate are 2 separate things, it's clear there's a trend towards climate change. I think and I hope and I believe, and as Mr Wilson, who I know doesn't share my view, has just pointed out, there seems to be an acceptance that the climate is changing, though I do accept that in politics maybe there's still a debate about why it is changing. I personally take my own views from the scientific community, and in particular from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which represents 120 governments and includes the World Meteorological Organization, if I can say that, as well as the 97% of scientific papers that all point to the fact that climate change is human-induced. I'll give way one more time because we could be at this all day.
I thank the member. Since he takes his views from scientists, would he take, or say if he takes his view from this scientist who said to capture the public imagination, we have to offer up scary stories. Each has to decide the right balance between being effective and being honest. One of the leading climate change scientists. Is that who he takes his advice from?
He hasn't given me who the scientist is, so I'll have to reserve judgment on that. But the fact is, there's no single climate body nationally that opposes the view that climate change is caused by human activity, whilst there are individual scientists. And indeed, I've been in a TV debate. I was told I was on with a professor and thought, oh, how am I going to debate with a professor? And when I looked him up on Wikipedia, it turned out he was a professor of sociology. Now, I have a lot of respect for sociologists, but it doesn't necessarily make them experts on climate change, nor do I, as I admit, does being a politician. But the scientific community established in 1990 that climate change was caused by human activity, and indeed the first scientific paper showing a causal link between carbon and climate was published in 1896. So I really do think it is time we moved on from this debate. And to be honest, it's a debate that I'm bored with, because debating is getting us nowhere. We need to move on to action and implementation of some of the action plans we've created. Virtually every action that I believe we need to take to mitigate against climate change has economic, social and environmental benefits. So even if you don't accept my analysis or that of the IPCC, there are good reasons to take many of the mitigation actions required. The CBI, for example, estimates the UK green economy to be worth $122 billion per year, and it is growing even despite the recession. Fossil fuels are running out and the price is continually rising. And I don't know what evidence Mr Wilson uses, but as a member of the EDI Committee, I've been tracking energy prices, and they're certainly on the rise, particularly gas, which sets our electricity prices in Northern Ireland. So in order to stabilise energy prices, as I think there's a general commitment to try to do, we need to grow in our indigenous energy industry, and for me that means clean, green, renewable energy. Our over-reliance on the car has led to expanding waistlines, and I often say by trying to tackle the problem of traffic congestion by building more roads is like opening your belt a notch to tackle obesity. We need to move to a more sustainable, more healthy lifestyle, not just because of climate change, but because our society needs it. We need to exercise more. We need more sustainable transport options. We need to get... I'm going to continue, sorry. Your colleague took all my time, forgive him way. But we need to put these actions in place regardless of your view on climate change. The impacts of climate change are being experienced globally as well as locally. I've heard numerous stories from aid agencies working in some of the poorest countries in the world of how whole communities, particularly farming communities, are having to uproot and move due to changing weather patterns and indeed the shifting of seasons. In Northern Ireland, I think the recent flooding has finally woken us up to the reality that we need to protect our communities from the impacts of climate change. The Environment Minister recently launched Northern Ireland's first climate change adaptation plan and did so proudly. And whilst he's only been in post a short period of time, we've had the warnings of climate change for decades, and we should be embarrassed that we're only starting to look strategically at this issue now. Had we listened to the warnings that came from the Green lobby back in the late 70s, early 80s, we could have prevented much of the flooding that our communities have faced. Human action has caused climate change, but political inaction is responsible for the flooding our communities have suffered. And in the amendment, I call for legislation to tackle both the mitigation, take the mitigation measures to prevent climate change, but also the adaptation measures needed to protect us against the climate change that is already happening. Why should we have legislation? Well, I would point to the words of the Chief Executive of the Committee on Climate Change, David Kennedy. He stated, in considering whether legislation would be helpful in Northern Ireland, the key factors are whether there is currently any political uncertainty, whether there is future commitment to building a low-carbon economy, whether there is scope for better integration across government, to the extent of which there are uncertainties, and the scope for better integration. Northern Ireland would help to signal political commitment, improve investment climate, and would therefore complement the UK Act in providing a basis for action. I think it's clear that we have had a lack of integration. I think it's clear there is political uncertainty. And I think that certainty and that clear direction can help not just tackle the causes of climate change and help adapt against climate change, but also give certainty to our business community who need to know whether or not they should continue to invest, as they already have done, in the ever-growing green economy. I've got a minute left. We really need to coordinate our efforts. We've had warnings from Lord Stern, a former former Vice President of the World Bank and an economist. We've had the World Bank, the IMF, the International Energy Agency, all express their concerns of the impact on the economy of climate change. It's no longer, as Mr Wilson once put it, the sandal-wearing, muesli-munching, Guardian-reading environmentalists although there's nothing wrong with being any of those things, all are agreed we need to act now for the benefit of our economy, our society and for the common good. We need a Climate Act.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In considering the motion before us today, I am content to support the overall intention, which is, I hope, not trying to pass a motion to control the weather, but rather to ensure that we as an Assembly are doing all that we can to support environmental awareness, to ensure that our defence and emergency planning is robust and effective, and to recognise the need for that planning to be subject to review to ensure lessons are learned. In terms of climate change itself, I'm not an expert, of course, and I look at endless reports and conflicting advice with uncertainty. But I hope that does not mean that I do not care or that I'm not willing to learn more. Put simply, whilst I'm not convinced of the merits of many examples of environmentally green projects, I'm reasonably sure that the overall trends of weather we're experiencing are not unrelated to a legacy of failing to protect our environment.